Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conversations That Matter of the wisdomfactory.net. I'm Heidi Hörnlein, and I'm your host today, together with Martin Ocik. Say hello for a moment, Martin.
Hello, everyone.
And he's coming to you from Turkey, while I am in Italy. And our guest, Anke Verhees, she comes from the Netherlands. Hello, Anke.
Hello, Heidi.
So our topic is the art of creating connections. And I know you are very, very, very much involved in this art of connection. Mm-hmm. And I would like to ask you to introduce yourself a little bit. Mm-hmm. You know, we have already said that you are in the Netherlands, what you are doing with this art of connection, how you are doing it, and whatever you think that people should know about you.
Thank you. I'm going to start as I always start whenever I lead a workshop or a training by owning my own experience and saying I'm nervous. I always feel nervous with these kind of contexts, even though if it's a very small group or a big group. So I'm a little bit nervous. My heart's in my chest, like pounding. And I'm also really excited to talk about this topic because it's a very, very, well, it's basically my whole life. Connection, how to create connection, supporting people and finding deeper connections to themselves first and then to other people. And how to go about that. It's sort of a field that can seem sort of elusive. You know, sometimes you feel connected and other times you don't feel connected and it's like magic. But you can also really personally contribute to creating more connection in your life by learning certain tools and gaining more awareness and skills and capacities. And I always say it's not rocket science. You just need to have a brave heart and a willingness to be vulnerable. And that's kind of the basis of it. And
yeah. And the willingness to want to be in connection, you know, and not to shy away. But before we go into the topic, I want to say to the people who are watching just now, you can leave your comments either on YouTube or on the website where we are streaming is thewisdomfactory.net/Anke-Verhees. And there you can leave your comments and also watch. Okay. So how do we create connection? Or let's start in this way. When we are born, we probably feel connected a lot. And how is it that we lose this connection and how can we regain it? That's a long question, but you start where you want to.
But I like it because I talk about this a lot, especially in coachings that I do with people, is that basically our whole social construct gets built between, say, 0 and 7. The big chunk of our internal operating system gets built in that phase of our lives. And then afterwards, we often just repeat the same patterns unless we become conscious of them and we can start shifting things. So, you know, as you see a newborn baby or like a super young toddler and how open and radiant and in the moment they are. And then we all experience certain things that can be small things or big traumas and everything in between that kind of like, you know, shield us down a little bit and we become a bit less available to the world and to ourselves and to other people. And we kind of withdraw within ourselves a bit more and more. And everybody has their own flavor of that and their own past. But in the end, what I'm finding, there's a lot of similarities in what people struggle with when they want to start creating more connection in their lives. So I think it's a beautiful place to start actually in early childhood. Yeah. And there's a lot of research currently being done on intergenerational trauma and how the mind is way more flexible than we thought it was, and how you can actually change, you know, the synapses and change, make different connections. And so there's a lot of exciting new material that shows that you can actually change the way you are and how you perceive the world and how you can develop yourself. And of course, you know, integral folks know all that also, but it's like also from a scientific perspective, there's a lot of research shedding light on that recently as well, which gets me very excited.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
I wanted to know about the connection when we are, let's say, introvert. We have a little bit more of a problem to connect with other people. It seems to be, at least, It may be a real introvert or an educated introvert, so that we are sort of holding back, I certainly was that, although I seem to be not to be anymore that. But how, in your experience, is that something innate, or is that something which is created and you can change it? And how?
You mean introversion, you mean?
Mm-hmm. Or let's say introversion, yes, but also this tendency to hold back, to not go ahead, to not go and look for connection, but better wait and see.
I think what I'm hearing you name is two different things. Like, one person is genuinely introverted and very happy solo. I would say go for it, right? I'm also sort of 50% an introvert, and if you take away my private time, I'm a very grumpy person and I don't want to connect. So I need to have to recharge myself. I have to be in my own space just by myself. But if there's a level of withdrawal, I think, which we all have at times and face in our lives, and sometimes always, I have not yet found a person that intrinsically doesn't want more connection in their life. Maybe with the exception of people that are on the spectrum and have real big problems. But everybody that comes to a workshop that I work with is I want to feel more connected. I don't want to feel less connected. And that means an actual felt sense of being connected to somebody else, feeling seen, feeling gotten, feeling understood, having a sense of a shared reality and not just talking at each other, but talking with each other and being with each other. So, my experience of people just want more of it, basically.
And now I go over to Martin's work. In a couple, often we say, you don't listen to me, and I want to connect to you, but you don't, and blah, 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 blah.
Yes. Yes.
What do you say about that? And maybe, Martin, you can chime in afterwards too.
Yeah. So one of the first rules it's not even a rule, it's more like an essential way of living, because it's not like a fixed thing you have to. But if you want to create genuine connection, you have to take ownership of your own experience. So if you're in a fight with your partner and you want to say you are ... or you are always ... that's even, level up. You're not really owning your experience. You might maybe want to say I am super annoyed with you right now because I asked you to do something and you didn't do it. And I feel like you've broken a promise, something like that. It's a very different entrance into a conversation than pointing the finger, right? So every time I want to say you, because I'm of course also tempted at times, I try to pause and go what's actually going on inside myself? And usually it's vulnerability or something that I don't want to admit, or I feel hurt, or there's something that's just tender inside of me. And then when I learn to own that more, I actually bypass the kind of the contraction of fighting and pointing fingers, and actually going in a level deeper and sharing what's really happening for me. And then hopefully being received in that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully being received. And I think that's where Martin can go in, because when we choose, let's say, the wrong partner, and then expect from them to be able to even listen when we say, I perceive that in this way and so on, might not be happen. What do you think, Martin?
First, I'm still a little stuck on the introvert and extrovert thing, because I think we went to introvert to someone who wants to be alone, and isn't that somewhat of a misconception, Anke?
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that at all. How I work with introversion, extroversion, just kind of broad strokes, is an introvert is somebody who needs alone time to recharge. Does not mean that person doesn't want meaningful connection in their lives. And an extrovert can recharge around people more easily. So it's different needs.
Yeah.
And I I have a few very introverted friends, but they have a few very dear friendships or partnerships around them, and get their connection needs met that way. Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, we think that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Mahatma Gandhi and many other, Barack Obama, very public figures and great communicators and connectors, were all introverts.
Are they?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you look up a list of introverts, there's quite some interesting names there.
Nice.
And I'm an introvert too, and I have no problem, with whatever public speaking or usually connecting with people. So another thing I found interesting, and then we can move on, is that introverts understand extroverts, but extroverts don't understand introverts. Right? So introverts can relate to extroverts. They kind of get it why they're extroverts. But extroverts always want to pull introverts out of their depression, their loneliness, their whatever stoicness, whatever, facial expressions or needs we sometimes have. Extroverts always feel there is something wrong with that, and that they have to get us out of our misery, so to speak.
Is that your experience?
Well, I read it in a book, and it is my experience, yes. That when I'm with other introverts, we kind of get each other, but when I try to connect with extroverts, they always feel, not always, but some of them feel a certain uneasiness, when I'm quiet or focused or these things. And then Heidi, yeah, go ahead.
One thing I noticed when you were speaking about the introvert extrovert, I always try to, I have an aversion is a strong word, but I can't find a more gentle word in English right now. But I try really not to speak in general terms like that, because it puts people in such a box right away. And so I'd love to meet people just where they are and however they are and what they're like and what they're not like. And I think for creating real connection, that's also a skill to develop, right? Not to generalize, but just be with the truth in the moment with that person, whatever they might type themselves like as well.
Yeah, but I have a friend who said, for a long time, humans have been so obsessed with typing themselves that they invented astrology. That was quite funny.
And it's helpful to have a good map, right? On reality.
I think it's helpful sometimes to know what Enneagram or love languages type we are, what level of consciousness a person is operating from at every given moment, and things like that. And some of these things are, of course, more fluid, and other things are, more part of our personality. And to understand and respect that, I think is helpful.
Agreed.
Without stereotyping.
Yeah. And I'm curious about, because Heidi asked you something about the partnership, like if you choose a partner that is might not seem compatible. I think that's why we went to you. So I'm curious about how you feel about that. And I'm interviewing you now.
Yeah. I mean, I've been listening to Daniel Siegel quite a bit around the neurobiology of we. I don't know if you ever heard about that. I heard that audiobook where because you mentioned you're interested in neurobiology and rewiring the brain neuroplasticity and things like that, and how the different parts of the brain interact with each other. So that's not absolutely cutting edge, but it's still quite new science. And I think it plays into, like when you said, whenever you want to make a you statement or not, first check in what is your inner state before you start to communicate, and then come from this place of communicating from what's alive in you, that we actually need to train our brain to develop the capacity to even do that. When we get flooded from the amygdala and our emotional part of the brain and get triggered, that happens so fast that without the training, our neocortex, gets hijacked, and we start to make all these you statements that happens to the best of us before, and then, the connection is obviously not authentic. and so that sometimes feels a little bit to me, to tell the people, well, why don't you just run a marathon? Everybody can do it. It's not a big deal, right? It's a bit the same thing to tell people, before you make a you statement or don't connect from your inner state of being, then the communication doesn't break down and or doesn't authentic connection doesn't happen. And we just assume that everybody can do it without a lot of practice. What's your sense around that? To turn my statement into a question.
I can't hear you anymore, Martin.
Oh.
There you are. Yes. I missed the last thing you said when you started laughing.
I said I'm turning my statement into a question. How do you deal with that when you realize that people just cannot help themselves to interrupt other people, to not speak from not making I statements?
Well, maybe before I answer that, it's good to set a little context on the type of work that I do around connection with people and the practice of circling. It's always practice for beginners and advanced practitioners, because I think it's a lifelong practice to hone your skills and build that muscle. But it's often practiced in group dynamics with a facilitator. So when something like that happens, so somebody gets triggered, which happens all the time because we all get triggered a lot. It's one of my trauma and trigger responses. Is something I'm really studying more and more. To look at, so if you can't catch it yourself, you will get feedback from other people. You will see I'm noticing that you're breathing faster. I'm noticing that you seem angry, or I'm noticing that you suddenly started talking very fast, or other cues. By mirroring each other, you get to kind of get more awareness on what happens for you in those moments. And then slowly you start building more awareness also. It's a gradual progress. Progress. But to just step by step learn more about yourself by getting that mirror from other people and seeing your own blind spots more. And I think that's what's beautiful in circling, which is a form of creating a lot of connection. And it's not therapeutic and it's not coaching. It's just being with each other in a moment and learning how to speak from our own experience and giving reflection on each other. But it's definitely not something that happens overnight to build capacity in that. But I move in a big community of people that are very dedicated to living this way. And over the many years that I've been doing this, all my friendships are like this right now. People who are like, "Oh, are you triggered right now?" And I'm not even defensive because I know my own triggers pretty well. I'm going, "Oh shit, yeah, I'm triggered. Okay, give me a moment." And I go I do what I know I can do to untrigger myself. Watch my breathing, look at my surroundings, calming down. Maybe even taking a walk or leaving the room and coming back. So, it becomes almost playful way of interacting with each other.
Yeah, that's good. And I would like to ask you, why is that called circling? What exactly is it?
That's a very good, why it's called circling. I know one of the people that contributed to the name always considered it actually quite a stupid name. And I've been trying to figure out a new name, but it's still circling. Well, the very practical level, you sit in a circle, but that's hardly anything new, I would say. And you could say you circle a person, or but it has odd connotations, almost like sharks circling a prey, like in the water. But it's definitely not what it's like. But we do. If I step away from the name and why it's called circling, because I don't exactly know. It's like I said earlier, it's simply being with each other in the moment without trying to change or fix anything. And oddly enough, that changes a lot. So people often come in from, for instance, we get people that are brilliant meditators. When they're on the mat in their own, on the pillow in their own worlds, they're just totally at peace. As soon as they come into a relation with people, peace gone, trigger on. And they want to learn how to navigate that relational field. So it's also often called like a relational meditation, where you slow down, you start looking at like what's happening in me, you start to learn how to share it, you start to learn how to follow your genuine curiosity as a compass into your own world and to somebody else's world. And then it's sort of like going down the rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland. And you end up in these, I don't know where we end up because it's always different. It can be boring, exciting, like reliving and healing some trauma. It can be very playful. It can be silent. And it's always very new.
So can you still explain it a little better? Is it that there is the whole circle present and one person is saying that there is something I'm feeling now like blah, blah, and the other person is sharing about them, or do they then respond to the person, or
I understand. Yeah. So the form there's different forms, but the form that I love most, it's called birthday circling, where one person is the focus point. It's like your birthday, right? Like you're the center point of attention. And then there is a facilitator whose main job it is to make sure that people own their experience, just to make, if there's like complexity or mutual trigger happening, to help people flesh that out by coming back to what's really happening for them. But mostly the whole group participates equally in listening to the person that's central. So he or she starts sharing their experience, and then the people in the circle start responding with how they perceive that person or the impact that person has on you. And then slowly you start weaving, kind of getting into the space of weaving a shared reality. And the purpose is to get what it's like to be that person. So if you would be the center of the circle, Heidi, we would try to understand what it would be like to live inside of you. Like, how do you see the world? Like, what's important to you? What's your unique way of being? What's your internal world like, if you want to share about that? How do you perceive yourself in connection? Do you feel a part of the group, or do you feel isolated, or do you feel it's like sort of locked in yourself, or like very available, or the stuff like with boundaries can come up. There's so many nuances that can play out in a circle. And the amazing thing is that what I always say is like what happens in the big, what happens in your day-to-day life will show up in the circle. So your patternings and connection in your daily life will show up in the circle. This is crazy accurate, like, because you are with a group of people and your people dynamics will get triggered. So it's very interesting place. It's sort of like a laboratory where you can practice your skills and then take them out into your daily life again.
Can you give an example of that? What the daily life example and how it comes out? And the other question is, so when you are in the birthday circle, do people ask you questions, or do you just talk about yourself? Okay.
You can also, some people are very talkative, other people get a lot of questions. Yeah, and that's one of the skills we're cultivating, is the following your natural curiosity as a guideline. It's sort of like also going where the energy goes.
Finding words, no, for the person who is in the middle.
Yeah, definitely. And it can be very easy for some and very hard for others. Yeah, a lot can happen in a circle. Just having all the attention already can be so overwhelming. And we start with a meditation and you open your eyes and everybody's looking at you. That can just kick off a whole process already. Yeah.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah. And what did you want to say about like
the everyday life, what you see in the circle? Can you give an example, a practical example, what you have observed, or yourself or somebody else?
Let me think. If I have a good example, I can. Yes, like for instance, there's like, I remember a few circles, and I have a flavor of that myself, definitely in the beginning, where people perceive questioning as an attack and they become defensive very quickly. Like, no, but I'm, and then trying to explain themselves away. But the people were actually just asking questions, and the defensiveness rises so quickly. And I often ask these people, like, is this something that happens in your daily life as well? I was like, yeah, I'm always feel like I have to defend myself from the people around me. And then you get to unravel if you actually are attacked or did you just feel attacked. And if you can kind of start working, just like exploring that, what is that like in the moment? Maybe like we're not chasing anything, we're not fixing anything, but often the result can be that you have more nuance in your, perspective around it, and you might try that out next time you go, to the supermarket. Like something simple like that.
Yeah, it needs a lot of self-awareness. And what I'm hearing you saying is that with this practice, you increase the self-awareness.
Yes. Yeah, it's literally like going to the gym, but then for your emotional capacity, relational capacity. Yeah, so it's also, I still practice this because I get sloppy at times, especially when I'm in more triggered spaces. And I just go like, okay, let's just go back to the basics, like owning my experience, being really honest about what's happening for me. And then I learn new things over and over and over. It never ends. I hope I'm never done with this either, because it's a beautiful inquiry and it really enriches my relationships.
Yeah, I do believe that. As I said, I had to you privately that I had a taste of it in a integral conference 2 years ago when it was. Yeah. And it was really amazing. I had no idea before what it was, but it was first to observe it and also to outside and to observe it inside. That was very inspiring. So, yeah, okay.
Can I ask a question, or do you have another one? Heidi?
No, go ahead.
So okay, you're familiar with Ken Wilber's work, right, or with spiral dynamics? Mm-hmm. And so is it also your experience that people at the green level are really the first level that are open for that kind of communication?
I'd say in generally speaking, yeah, green towards, higher. But there's also, I also have worked with people that are kind of like more orange, strong mind-based personalities that get to look at it more like cracking a code, like a computer code, cracking the code of human relationships. And they can get really into like, I want to crack the code because I want to, for instance, be a better leader, or I want my team to, basically do what I say and listen to me. But like from that perspective, it can also be really valuable. It's almost like a sneaky way into teaching people more relational skills, but from a very practical angle. Mm-hmm. But I think it's dominantly mostly green and teal, and then yeah.
Because when we look at the art of creating connection, I think every meme or each level of consciousness has its own rules and methods and ways of creating connection. Right? I mean, on the survival level, obviously, herds or very primitive tribes, early tribes would just huddle together to create connection to feel safe or to survive. Yeah. And on the next level, they would create connection through rites and through, or rituals and rites of passage and things like that to create safety, right? Very superstitious. And they wouldn't probably share their feelings. And gangs or egocentric people, they have their ways of creating connection through demanding respect and so like asserting their power, right? Mm-hmm. And mythic people would create connection through their mythic beliefs systems, through reading scripture or praying together, or having certain ceremonies and in the army, or you get the idea. And rational people, they create connection through succeeding together and keeping emotions out of their conversations, because they don't feel there is any value in that you need to look everything from an objective perspective.
And of talking together, no? And of conversation, talking, and exploring stuff.
Well, and focusing on what is that? Getting you not focused on the problem, not focus on the person, but focus on the problem, for example, right? So they even take the personal out of the conversation and externalize it and say, what do we want to accomplish? What is the goal here? And so isn't that then frustrating sometimes for people to do circling and have this develop this way of saying, you know, my ultimate truth is only inside of me. There's no objective truth outside. And the goal of connection and communication is not to solve necessarily any practical problems, but just to create authentic connection with human beings. You know, how does that translate? Coming to Heidi's earlier question, that this is what I teach, right? That when couples are at different levels of development, their communication styles or their way of creating connection and their goal for why they want to create connection is very different.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, of course, like the big question: how can we transcend these steps? How can we? It's fairly easy to create connection between people on a lateral way if they're at the same level of consciousness, but when they're at different levels, to create connection is much more difficult. And what wisdom can you share around that with us?
Well, I think I love that you going up the spiral and naming the different flavors of connection in the different levels. I learned something there, just because I've never looked at the spiral from that angle, interestingly enough. But the basis of, I once tried to explain circling to a group of astrophysicists, literally, who just explained to me what a black hole is, because that was my first ever question when I went to high school, and I was in my physics class, like, right, I want to know what a black hole is. And the teacher said, let's start with gravity. And I was basically bored out for the rest of the time because I wanted to know about the black hole. And I tried to explain to them what circling was, which this guy I was trying to do that to, he's like, well, I don't get it. No, I don't get it. I don't get it. And I said, okay, how can I make this so abstract that what's the starting point of all the work that we're doing? And then I said to him, like, the baseline, like the base thing that is like underlying this connection work is the premises that everybody has a different perspective on the world. And we're there to kind of explore that. And we honor that everybody has a different perspective, which is, of course, very green and, upwards.
Right.
But I've also experienced, and this is where it gets fun, I think, but it doesn't necessarily need two people to create more, two people conscious of creating connection to create more connection. Like, I can still ask, and I've done this, like, very orange businessman or my mom, who's mostly a green person, but can also become very rational, questions from my genuine curiosity, and seeing them open up about their inner worlds. Like, what's it like to have this job? And what are you most excited about? Like, I'm really curious how this works. And like, I'm genuinely excited and interested in them as a person. And I've seen over and over and over again, different people just, open up, because I do believe that underneath all the, the developmental levels, we're also mammals, and we also want to connect. And it's very human for us to want to have, close connections in our lives. So, of course, it's more easy and pleasant when there's a mutual meeting there, and especially, I think, in long-term relationships. But I've also witnessed and tried out that's, just going for it, just creating it where I want to create it, and not even necessarily consciously all the time.
Mm.
Yeah.
What you said here, I found that very interesting. You ask genuine questions with a genuine interest.
Yeah.
And that opens people up.
Yeah.
And
it's like kind of like magic. Yeah.
Yeah. And normally we don't do that. We want to tell ours, we want to tell you what I have done today and blah, blah, blah. And hardly be interested in the other person, This is sort of this strange egocentrism which we are having through many levels, not only on the red level, but which we are still taking along, and even in green, So the relief is when somebody is genuinely asking you questions. That's my experience,
Yes.
And they open up and can tell you when they know out of your nonverbal hints that you are not put them on a trial, that you are really interested in what they want to say.
Yeah.
Is it one of your tools you are using?
Yeah. There's a game that we play, and that's one of my favorite games, especially with new people that have never done this before. It's called the Curiosity Game. It's very simple. you pair up. Like people sit down, half the group sits down with their eyes closed, and then the rest of the group finds somebody they're curious about. And mostly you haven't spoken much to people, so it's more like a gut feel, like curiosity. And then you sit down in front of that person, you start asking that person anything you want to ask. And the person that can answer can answer the question, but it can also say, like, I don't want to talk about that. And you can do honoring your own boundaries, because it's, honoring yourself is sort of agreement number one in the work that we do. And then you can just see people opening up. And then afterwards, I always ask, like, what was that like? And then people go like, it was so amazing to just be able to talk and see that person was actually interested, because they asked the questions they were interested about. Of course, they would be interested about the answers, right? But also these dynamics come up like, oh, I felt at some point like I needed to ask a question back because I was being selfish, because I was talking all the time. So all these stuff, these dynamics get triggered, and you get to look at that, like how that often plays out. So if you want to do this, for instance, with your partners, you can just set a timer, like 10 minutes or 5 minutes if you want to start easy. And just, for 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you everything I want to know about you right now. And then you swap. And as an extra bonus, you can even tell the people that have been sharing about their world. So for instance, I would ask you a lot of questions, and I'm being like, some of them might be a bit vulnerable. You might have shared something that, usually don't share with random strangers. And then at the end, I give you a gift by saying what I got about you as a person, like a thing that stands out for me about you, and the way you are, or how you say things, or what you spoke about, or how you impacted me. So it's a very sweet, sweet little game. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is wonderful, because you get a sort of external confirmation of what you are, of your being.
Yes.
And whenever do we get that? In education, we normally get that what is not going well, and hardly ever we get a recognition of what is good about us.
Yeah.
So this, I think we all have a sort of how do you say, a need to fill the empty bucket of recognition.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think there's a lot of unmet needs in the world nowadays. A lot. And you can I sometimes see people come in, and you can see that they kind of need more, like a plant, more water. And at the end of a training or a weekend, and they just look so full and so happy and kind of saturated almost. Yeah. It's very wonderful. Sweet.
So curiosity, I like the idea of curiosity. That's of course a big thing in relationships. But what goes on for you, Anke, when you show this curiosity to someone and they share a worldview with you, or opinions or values or actions or desires that go very much against your values and your worldview?
Of course, that differs from moment to moment, with person to person. But you can probably figure that I'm a very curious person by nature. So if this person is not like intentionally harming people or shaming people, or doing things that are actually very conflictive to my values, I try to get what they're all about. Like I'm trying to get more. So I ask more questions to see, like, okay, but when you say this and that, what do you actually mean? So I make sure I understand them correctly, and I dig deeper basically. And I try to, because I have judgments as well, of course. Like a part of this work is really owning your judgments, which is absolutely refreshing, that you can just name like, hey, I'm judging you for this and this right now. And just seeing how that lands, because usually we judge people and then we judge ourselves for judging people, especially when we're good little spiritual people, right? We're not supposed to judge. So and then we have this whole mind fuck going on and not connecting to people at all anymore. So yeah, and sometimes I own those judgments. I go like, well, I'm really judging you for whatever you said right now, or I imagine you have this belief about the world, and I struggle with hearing that. So it's not like I have to agree with everybody, but I do want to understand as much as I can. Yeah.
But so the person couldn't say, why do you struggle with this? I mean, this is totally obvious. Everybody sees it that way. What's wrong with you? that you don't agree with Trump. I mean, it's like everybody agrees with him.
Why don't you see the world like I do?
Yeah, like, why don't you see the world like I do? What's wrong
Yeah.
with you? And not only I, but basically everybody else sees it that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, usually when that doesn't happen a lot, by the way, interestingly enough, because that's
You're
kind of
not
like
in politics, obviously.
No, I am. That's true. I'm not in politics.
You don't have to solve the problem of Brexit.
Well, I think, maybe politics could use a bit more of these skills to get actually more understanding across the aisles, right? Because it's very polarizing. And now a friend of mine once joked, like, maybe you should take, Trump to the forest and teach him some skills. Like, the forest was just like a sort of a random location. It sounds a bit dodgy, but just and that would be. I doubt that he would be open to that, but biggerly speaking, I think it would be very valuable to actually start listening to people, and not to be right or wrong, but just to create better understanding. Yeah.
But from an internal perspective, we have a few choices then available, right? We can sympathize with people at their level that they're at, and see that there is always a certain truth. Mm-hmm. And everybody's right from their own perspective. People are just not equally right. And we can withhold our truth and just create connection at a level where the other person is able to connect with us then. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I am not, like, in this sense, like, for me, the lines and the stages, they're kind of fluctuating in the moment from person to person. It's like I don't. I can be a very
one person. We want to create connection with one person.
Yeah.
And then, let's say that person has a mythic, somewhat conservative, religious or political or whatever, very one-sided perspective, and sees that as the only right perspective.
Yeah.
And of course we can say, wow, and when I hear you say that, that I feel really scared, or I feel this judgment towards you. But they will not feel then a connection. They will say, why do you feel scared? Or why do you judge me? Right. Well, and you can try to create connection with them on an emotional level, but it's very unlikely that they will engage with you at that level. They just will find you more and more weird and will then end the conversation. Right? So which doesn't create connection. Or you can say, I see your point, right? We need rules, we need border security, we need religion to create moral, right? We can sort of like meet them where they are and have a conversation on their level without bringing in our real authentic interior world or our more rational worldviews or whatever we may have on a later level of development. So would you rather create connection than with people, or suggest that people should learn to connect with people at their level, or should they always be authentic and risk sort of like then not to have a connection with that person, which they will most likely, the other people will most likely end the conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a few things that come up for me when hearing you speak. The one is, for me, it's always important to have a sense of buy-in or safety, so to say, you could also say, before I reveal parts of my inner worlds. And part of that is leading by example. So I'm usually one of the people that shares a bit more of their inner world than the person in front of me, if it's a new person. And that creates more openness often in the other person. But I would also sort of spider sense out like, hey, but if I really would share something that's very meaningful for me, can it be received? Because if you share something and it's not received, that's actually a very painful thing. So I also hold that very preciously, I guess, my inner world. And at the same time, I have this practice that is one of the core practices of circling that I still sometimes struggle with. And it's one of the greatest thing to practice, I think, is assuming that the other person has a positive intent. So if I assume that the person in front of me, whatever he or she is, has some sort of positive intent, like a value that really matters, or they want to bring something across that's important to them, and they're not intentionally trying to harm me, because that's only a very small percentage of people that actually intentionally want to harm people, I would say. That is a very big mind switch for me. First is like I have to, persuade people to be more authentic or show more of themselves. Or, I mean, people are always authentic, right? Even if you don't show yourself, that's an authentic expression of yourself at the moment. But but it's a very powerful perspective shift for me. Yeah.
To assume that everybody is well intended.
Yeah, has a positive intent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it really changes my view on the world and how I perceive the world and the people in it as well. Like, I bike a lot on my bike through Amsterdam, and if either of you has ever biked through Amsterdam, but it's kind of crazy. There's a lot of bikes, and lots of people have bike road rage, including myself. Like, I get so aggressive on my bike. People are like, "Get the fuck out of my way! I'm busy!" Like, really, like, and people swear, and I've been called a whore multiple times for absolutely zero reasons. Like, really rough sometimes. And I do it as well. And then I sometimes start flipping the switch and go like, what if all these people had a positive intent? Like, oh, maybe this woman just needs to get her child from daycare and she's rushing, or, like just playing around with that. And sometimes my mind can be so stubborn. Like, I don't want to assume positive intent because I'm like my road rage. I'm very attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a very valuable practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in nonviolent communication, the Marshall Rosenberg and the followers, they assume that everybody wants to or wants to meet their needs.
Yes.
And the needs are different. So maybe the intent, I would say, maybe is not always positive, but everybody tries to meet their needs.
Yeah.
Not positive necessarily towards you, but for something. When she wants to get her child from school or something, so that is a positive intent. But you come across and hinder her, and then she gets angry, or even I have seen when people get fearful because, they feel sort of attacked. And with a bicycle, there can be collisions, When they are fearful, then they often get angry and begin to swear. So.
Yeah.
But what you are telling us, in some sense, is what Martin said before: the integral capable talking to the people on the level where they are. So you say you reveal as much as you think the person can of yourself. Reveal as much as you think the person can handle and would accept it and would be igniting for them to open up. So that's. With other words, is that you are looking where the person is at and accordingly act with them, isn't it?
Yeah, but that sounds almost like I'm like consciously.
No, that's intuition. I think that's intuition.
Process.
Yeah. I think.
And so. I always rebel a little bit against the levels of development, because that's what I said earlier about like the fluctuations, like in even day to day, like I'm like minutes a minute, I fluctuate all over the place. So, and hierarchy in there. So that's
okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. I agree with that. But the key thing is that you use your intuition to grasp where the other person is at, if it's level of development or mood or whatever, and meet the person there where they are. The levels of development often seem like to be, so fixed, and but I don't think they are, as you said. They are the center of gravity, we say, but during the day we can go up and down, and we can do it also deliberately, or like when you act in your profession, then often you do it intuitively and not figure out, oh, this person is now there and now I have to use tool number 358. That's not how things go, no.
Well, I must say in the beginning, it went a little bit like that, because you're practicing, right? I'm learning skills, and it's a bit clunky, and it's like learning a new language. And then I must also say there's ways to create deliberate, conscious context where you can steer somebody or both of you into a space where there's more intentional space. And that's really easy to do as well. Like, for instance, I come home and my boyfriend is really preoccupied with work and I want to share something that's vulnerable for me, and I start speaking and he's like distracted and I don't feel seen, and before you know it, you're in a fight. And I can also ask him, like, hey, do you have time? Like, I want to share something. Do you have time right now? And if he says no, but can we do it later? It's like, yeah, when shall we do it? And we set the time and then we're both available. So you can also create these moments where you can be received more. And that's also a skill that you can develop.
Exactly, relational skills. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So many skills.
Can I backpedal for a moment? Because you earlier said, Anke, that everybody is always authentic. But when you adjust, or when we adjust, or then you said you hold back when you realize that somebody cannot sort of like accept your truth or hear your truth. Right? Are you then in that moment still authentic?
And this is a discussion I've had with a lot of like friends about what is authenticity, right? We always assume that like showing your inner world or showing everything that's happening is like, some people assume that is authenticity. How I see it, I think like the urge to hold back is also an authentic urge in the moment, or the withdrawal or the trauma response are all authentic responses from my system. So I sometimes don't even really know what the word authenticity means anymore, because there's so many different flavors or perspectives on it. But I guess what I'm trying to say, and which is also very true in circling and in the coaching that I do, like I value the reactivity or the trauma is just as much part of a person as it's like the open-hearted share or like the vulnerable laying down of information. You know, it's all part of the person. So I've come back a bit from like I used to share everything, you know, I was like this open book, and then I would often feel very raw afterwards. Like, actually, I maybe have crossed my own boundaries a little bit here. Like, maybe I do want to pull back a little bit more and be a bit more selective, and that feels good to me. And that also strikes me as an authentic impulse. I don't know. I'm curious how that lands for you, and if you have a different perspective on that.
I totally agree. And even when, you know, in these moments when you pour out everything which you have inside, it's an overload of other people. You don't respect their boundaries. So I agree with you that authenticity, the word, it doesn't mean anything anymore, really. We don't really know what to think about it. How can I say? It's the same thing with speaking your truth, you know. That's, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. So, and these are, I think theoretically we cannot really grasp it. I think we really need to know, to go into the moment and feel into it, sense into it, and sense what is the right and maybe not right versus wrong, but appropriate thing to do. And I think that's what you mean with authentic, as far as I've understood what you are sharing.
Well, there's also this quality of being able to share about, for instance, if you can share that which is a great thing if you can get to that place. And when you notice you're triggered, and you can actually share that, I'm triggered, you know, I need a moment, or I'm really angry right now and I want to pull back, or I feel closed up and I don't feel safe to share, or whatever that can be. Like, if you're still practicing these skills, of course, you don't do that maybe with your police officer.
That's what I thought. Or in the autobus, you wouldn't do that.
Because there's also a level of like consent happening, right? Like, do you both want to engage in this quality of connection?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And you can always check that. Are you available for this or not? And yeah.
That leads us to ask you, you are doing mainly the things in Holland, no? Your courses. But before you said you do it also online, and I'm very curious about that. Can you share with us also your website and your whatever upcoming events? And
yeah. Thanks for asking. My website is connectionlab.nl. So it's like a laboratory, like Connection Lab. And I will start leading Circling online in April. It's a little bit delayed through the Authentic World platform. I'm happy to share a link. And at the moment, I mostly give trainings in Holland and Amsterdam. So both introductory weekends. There's one coming up in March. And it happens to be that today and tomorrow are the last days for our early bird.
That's good.
The 17th of March is literally purely coincidental. So if people are interested in getting like the basic skills of, this practice down. So it's really like we're building it up gradually over the scope of 2 days with a great team. It's already half full, so we're very excited about it. You can reach out and ask me more questions, or I can post a Facebook link somewhere. And I also train people in the more in-depth skills of leading circling. So when you step into leadership of a relational practice, everything in you that's in your own blind spots will get activated. So it's a very powerful way to upgrade your own leadership, both your blind spots and your sweet spots, and get more awareness about it and work with that. And then bring that into your daily life, be it leadership at work, or in your private life, or wherever you want to use it. And I love that. It's a very intimate training for 6 people. That's more like in-depth for people that have some circling training already. And then I coach people, life coaching, which is a lot about the connection with yourself and finding your unique flavor and letting that shine out and bring it to the world and working with everything that's in the way. And also starting to do more executive coaching for leaders leaders mostly more in the green to teal perspective that want to, maybe sometimes they will still work in quite orange organizations or from orange up, and they want to create better teams or more of a team spirit working together and how to do that. And I write a blog. So if you sign up to my newsletter, every week I write about a connection thing that's current with my clients or myself. And I just, you have a little inbox connection tip every week.
So your newsletter is the blog, or do you have an extra
that's also
URL?
on my website. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we are almost at the end. Martin, do you want to?
Wow, yeah.
To ask something? Or to make a conclusion, wrapping up? You're muted.
Yes. It's a cliffhanger.
So one thing is, it's a somewhat sarcastic takeaway, is that even if I'm inauthentic, I'm authentically inauthentic, right? That's like, we shouldn't be judgmental and having it, or people should not be judgmental and having a judgment. Right?
Own the judgments.
The so-called performative contradictions. Mm-hmm. And then a little earlier when you talked about levels, in my first book, I don't know if I can hold this up here. You see this, the river and the banks. You see that image?
Yeah.
Right? And so one insight, and that has proven over 9 years teaching that stuff fairly accurate, is that women perceive, or females, or very feminine people, perceive the levels of consciousness, as you and Heidi perceive it, as relatively fluid, right? You made exactly that gesture, you go up and down. Mm-hmm. While men tend to perceive levels of consciousness more like the banks of a river. Like that when they have reached a certain level, they operate pretty much, 90% from that level, or try, or at least repress all the lower levels and not go down there and always be at the highest level that they have accomplished. And that obviously then leads to this other image, that men are usually more simple. Oh, this is the Turkish book, so the top means man and the bottom means woman.
This explains a lot of my frustrations with a few men in my life. Now, thank you for giving me this awareness.
Yeah. And hence that inability of men often to meet people at earlier levels of development authentically, while females have more of a talent of meeting, they don't even perceive it as an earlier or lower level of development. They see just more the ripples on the water when you throw in a stone, right? Development, it goes more horizontal outward, and it's not hierarchical, while males often experience it more as a hierarchical thing.
Martin, you are politically incorrect. Women and men are the same. You should know that.
Oh, I don't agree with that, but that's a whole different topic.
I don't either, but just make a joke at the end. Okay, Anke, that was very, very nice.
You're opening a whole other can of worms.
Exactly,
actually.
we need another hour.
Thank you. That was very enlightening.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to teach a lot about communication this weekend. So we have a weekend workshop too this weekend. So.
Oh, lovely! Great.
Yeah. So use the waves instead of the riverbanks.
Yeah. And just to, I don't know if this is relevant for you in any way, Martin, but there's a whole games manual with like the things like the curiosity game just written out. Like somebody in our community made that. And I can happily send you a copy if you want to have some like new connection flavor or whatever.
Sure,
just reach out.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was really sweet. I was nervous, but I'm very happy to get to talk with you. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much.
How do you feel now, Anke?
I feel I could talk for 2 more hours. Like I'm really into it right now. It's one of my.
How do you feel?
I feel very happy, and I also feel seen, and I feel excited. Yeah.
Wonderful.
That's fine. That's wonderful, and we succeeded, Martin.
Yeah. Now we have to say, when we hear you say that, we feel really happy.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and also to the viewers who were almost to the end, almost everybody. That's fine, and come back and go to Amsterdam to see Anke or subscribe for the course. I'm really interested. I will look into your newsletters, which come every week. Okay.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.